Hi, my name is Anthony DeSalvo, as I would hope you know. I would really hope you know. Um, I'm looking in at President Biden v. Nebraska. Some of the context of this case was during his 2020 campaign run. Our president, Joe Biden, promised to provide student debt relief. And on August 24th of 2020, the White House put out a plan that showed how they would cancel student debt, try to make the student loan system more manageable and protect students, and aim at reducing college costs in the long run. The plan promised to cancel up to $20,000 of student debt to some individuals, specifically those that made less than $125,000 annually. And there was exceptions and whatnot to Pell Grant recipients. However, before that plan was able to get on its way, the Eighth Circuit of Appeals, blocked President Biden's plan. The states of Nebraska, Arkansas, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, and South Carolina sued President Biden on November 14th of 2020. The court issued an emergency injunction, putting the student debt program on hold until the Biden admin appealed it to the Supreme Court. Just for clarification, it was the state's attorney generals who sued on behalf of the states. The legal context and basis for this case is the Higher Education Relief Opportunities for Students, or the HEROES Act, as we will be referring to it as. What this does is it allows the Secretary of Education to waive or modify student loan debt for individuals who suffer directly from economic hardship as a result of wars, military operations, or natural emergencies. The Biden admin attempted to use this as in response to COVID-19 and the following economic recession that occurred. And some of the other important context from this case is actually the important questions doctrine. What this means is pretty much what powers stays out of the executive office and what powers does Congress hold. So it's pretty much asking, is it a major political question? Does the president have the authority to make the decision? The legal basis of the states was not just a concern over the student debt issue, but also whether the states actually had the legal basis to sue. That's a lot of what the liberal justices were worried about in this case. So anyway, obviously this went to court, the Supreme Court, and the decision that followed was the Biden admin does not have the authority under the HEROES Act to cancel student debt. So it also showed that the states were able to sue because they cited potential harm it could have on their own states. And to explain this, they showed the Missouri Higher Education Loan Authority. Pretty much this is just Missouri's state-based program to cut funding for college students. And because of the HEROES, if let's say this plan did go into effect, lots of students would get their student debts canceled, but the Missouri Higher Education will also lose much of its funding. And so that has a direct injury to that plan, or sorry, not that plan, but rather that institution. And so that's what they cited as the major issue that the states were suing over. And so that's why they were allowed to sue. In a concurring opinion, Justice Barrett also said that Biden does not pass the major questions doctrine and is overreaching in its authority. This was a 6-3 decision split based on ideology. Political ideology, to clarify. The dissenting opinion was Sotomayor, and Jackson, which argued the states having no authority to sue and it being an overreach of fundamental rights. They also argued the HEROES Act allows the Secretary of State to cancel student aid in cases of emergency. So the big reason why this is important is that within the few years the Biden admin has been in place, they've received lots of legal battles. They've been sued many times already, and this is just one of the many battles they're facing. But moreover, the Biden admin is still attempting to cancel student debt, just using a different piece of legislation to do so. And so the way this was covered was pretty much the same for both ways, just opposite, as the media tends to be. Pretty much the right-wing media outlets explains how Biden is awful in trying to not care about the Supreme Court, and so a lot of them said that the Supreme Court ruled that's unlawful, but Biden is still trying to get it done, and so that Biden should be impeached for that and all that and whatnot. However, it's important to state that that's up to your own interpretation of if that's going to be an overreach of the checks and balances, and we'll get to that later on. Some of the left-wing media coverage was these, again, pretty much the same thing, just in reverse. The justices are evil, Biden's trying to get things done, and Biden is just such a good leader that he's trying to still cancel student debt using a different piece of legislation. So, some of the biggest things to think about from this case, and the biggest takeaways I personally had, was based on whether you believe this is a political or legal decision. That's one of the biggest things you have to think about here. One of the major two questions is, do you believe the Supreme Court made this out of political or legal reason? It's up to your own interpretation. Now, I'm not going to tell you what to think, and so you have to decide by yourself. And so the second major question here is trying to understand whether or not the president is overstepping in his boundaries. If the checks and balances that were put in place, if he's attempting to find a different way to cancel, or if he's not caring about what the Supreme Court said, if he's pulling an Andrew Jackson, pretty much. And some of the major, for example, some say it's buying votes, and that's one of the political reasons for doing this. And so you have to say, all right, is this a political reason that the president's trying to get this done, or is this not an overstep of boundaries, but just rather looking out for people? And so that's what you have to determine here. Is he getting things done through different legislation, or is he overstepping boundaries? And so that's some of the big questions to think about here, and that's really the overarching theme of a lot of these cases. And so, thank you for listening to my presentation.